whether we're in person or whether we are online. And so, again, I'm grateful that you are going to be a part of it. You all signed on to Zoom, so that's the biggest first step. Way to go. A couple important just housekeeping things. It's important that we all stay muted so that we can hear the speaker. And so if you'll just make sure you stay muted in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see if your name has the microphone with the red line through it. That's a good thing. We want to make sure everyone's muted so we can hear what needs to be said. If you don't want to be on the video, you can also click stop video. That will not stop Zoom. That will just stop your video. So for some reason you don't want to be on video, that's fine, but it is good to see all your beautiful faces. So yeah, we are going to walk through a couple important things tonight. If you have questions, we would love for you to use the chat option, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. And if you chat, Chris and I will be monitoring that, and we'll make sure we allow you to speak and share if you have any questions or concerns or thoughts. The other thing is we are having another one of these tomorrow, and it's the exact same thing. So we're grateful you're here tonight. There's no need to attend tomorrow's meeting. The next time we want to see is Friday 30 for our meeting we're going to practice voting and all that good stuff. So again, welcome and thank you for being here. And I will pass it over to Bishop Bill.
Thank you so much, Julie, and thanks to the members of the planning team and to Christina Johnson-Dernier, who's our communications and events and first third of life coordinator. They've been working really hard to pull off this event. So I want to start with the purpose of our assembly, and I'm going to invite Chris to pull up that introduction letter. So we are aligning the purposes of our assembly with our values as a synod, with the values that we're bringing forth as part of our strategic plan. And our first value is faithful in relationships, which is about our remembering who we are in relationship to each other, just as God always remembers who God is in relationship with us. And so we want to experience our life together in Christ. We want to figure out how we can continue to accompany one another as we follow Jesus in a helpful and faithful way. Authentic in our welcome is a value that's about not just welcoming people, but also their gifts and the unique gifts that each person brings. Each person's gifts are authentic. They're authored by God and they are unique to them, and we need all the gifts. So we want to reaffirm our commitment to be a diverse church, and we want to celebrate the gifts we have both as a people and also as congregations and synod. And finally, we'd like to demonstrate love making a difference, our third value, which is about actually making a difference and not just having good intentions. And so we want to get real focused on our important lines of effort in our strategic plan around congregational vitality and diverse leadership and striving for justice. And we're going to be investing some time and work so we'll be rolling up our sleeves to work together so that our synod can be as effective as possible. So with that, I'd like to begin with a prayer that is the same prayer that we will say at the opening of our of our synod assembly coming up here in just a little less than a week on next Saturday. So let's pray. Oh God, on this day, you open the hearts of your faithful people by sending into us your Holy Spirit. Direct us by the light of that Spirit that we may have a right judgment in all things and rejoice at all times in your peace. Through Jesus Christ, your Son and our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. So the first thing, as I understand it, Chris, is rules. Talk about rules of the assembly. Okay. Many of you, I'm sure, have attended churchwide assembly before. Let me just begin by thanking you for your willingness to serve as a churchwide assembly, as a voting member to the church, I keep saying churchwide, Synod Assembly, thank you for being willing to serve as a voting member of our Synod Assembly. We have a lot of important work to do every year, and especially this year, because as you know, we didn't meet last year in Assembly. Our Constitution allows that. And so thank you so much for your willingness to serve as a voting member at our church-wide assembly. Let me just say briefly what that means, that you are a voting member. In our church polity, the way we understand church as members of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, is that the church exists in three different expressions. The congregational expression, which is what we experience every week in worship and in service in our communities. Then there's also the synodical expression, which is what we experience when we're together in Synod Assembly. And then, of course, our church-wide expression as well, which we actually experience when we're together in our church-wide assembly every 3 years. So when you come not as notice that you're not a delegate or a representative. You come as a voting member. You are there with a view not just to representing your congregation. Of course, you're going to be mindful of people's interests, that you're there who've elected you, but you're primarily there to be mindful of the whole synod and the whole church, and that's why your title is voting member. So let's look at those rules, Chris, and maybe you can say a little bit about this page.
Sorry about that. So on our churches, on our synod's website, nwmnsynod.org, you can, there's a banner at the very top, and it has our Synod Assembly logo. And on that page, I'll go back to that now. You will come to this page. So you click on the banner that looks like this, and this is your hub for all the things that you need for Synod Assembly. And so what we're going to talk right now is the rules of organization and procedure, especially lifting up the things that are different for this Synod Assembly. So this is the main document. Think it's 15 to 20 pages. So if you want a good time, you can read that one. But the main things that are different this year is in this.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, so because of the nature of our assembly, that it's a virtual assembly, and because we've reduced our meeting time from normally 2.5 days down to just 1 day, we have designed the rules in order to expedite business. Not to ensure that certain things pass or don't pass. People will still have the opportunity to vote for or against all the resolutions and motions. But these rules are designed so that we can move through our business in a fairly expeditious fashion for the type of assembly that we are having. So the first one is that during the assembly, motions other than procedural motions will not be allowed. This is a rule that is valid and also legal and aligned with Robert's Rules of Order, as we've checked it out with our parliamentarian, who's also our synod attorney, Rolf Nickemoll from Fergus Falls. And so if you would like to make substantive motions to revise or to amend one of the resolutions or to amend the budget, you may do so if they are submitted to the email address listed here by noon on Thursday of the day before the assembly. So that's this coming Thursday. The same will be true with elections. We will have a complete ballot, and I will entertain a unanimous ballot if I am able to. If not, we'll proceed to a regular secret ballot. But if you would like to make nominations from the floor, you may do so. But again, those nominations will have to be made by noon on Tuesday before. And the same is true for revisions to the budget. Those are our main items of business. Will be of course, we have 7 or 6 resolutions that we will be passing or considering for passage. and we will have our budget, of course, to be approved, and elections are our main items of business. We'll hear some reports, and there'll be some videos and a fantastic speaker that I'll say a little bit more about later. So there are some motions that are allowed during the assembly, and those would be the procedural motions. If you want to move up just a little bit, Chris, in the document. So these kinds of motions, like if a motion to refer or to table, or a motion to call the previous question, or to suspend or revise the rules, and orders of the day, all of those usual motions that are really procedural motions shall be allowed. Another thing to note that's actually not listed here is that debate on any one item and any related amendment. Oh, yeah, there it is. Debate on main motions and all subsequent related motions shall be limited to 12 minutes. Or in other words, 6 speakers, because you'll have 2 minutes each to speak, preferably alternating for and against the motion. And then in order to obtain the floor, if you want to speak, you would do so by sending a private chat message to moderator, and we'll practice that on Friday night, and we'll also talk you through it the first time when we get started on Saturday morning. You just send a chat to some moderator, say, and you will share your name, your congregation, and your reason for obtaining the floor, which will normally be to speak either for or against the motion that's on the table or on the floor of the assembly. Questions about rules. So this is why we're having these pre-meetings, because if you wish to make any amendments or add addition or changes to the budget, you will have to have done some homework in advance and have considered, have attended this meeting and perhaps have looked carefully at the motions and the resolutions that are there on our Synod website. I don't know if the ballot is up yet. I think we're still working on filling a few last-minute positions, but
there's many of the bios up. We're still missing it.
Okay, the bios are there, but I mean the ballot itself. Yeah, we're still waiting on the ballot, but that will be up before Thursday, so that if you would like to propose on additional nominations in addition to those that are already on the complete ballot, you may do so by noon on Thursday. Questions? Any questions about the rules? Okay, what's next, Chris?
We have the budget, because I thought I saw Catherine on.
Yes, she's here.
Treasurer there. Hi, Catherine.
Catherine Dickey is our Synod treasurer, and she's had to do a lot of additional work this last year of the pandemic to make sure that we were not, yes, it's true, to make sure that we were staying on track, and I've been grateful for her work. This will be her last Synod assembly as a treasurer, but I'm sure she'll come to every assembly because she's a church junkie like the rest of us.
It's no joke. I have found this. I don't know. Can everybody hear me okay? My husband's doing dishes, so you might hear a little clattering up there, but I think we can manage. I never would have realized how faith affirming Synod assembly can be. And I've been very happy to be part of it. It is my last year of 4. And most of my reports, when you go back to that webpage that Christina had up, my information is all in the 2021 Synod Assembly report. Christina, there's quite a bit there for everybody to look at. There's the entire audit report. Thank you. There's the audit report. There's the next 3 are just single sheets of our audited financial statements that are really interested. You don't have to wade through the entire document. Please read it all. But if you just want those 3 documents, there they are. I loaded those separately. And then there's our Synod year budget. Could you go ahead and open that one up, Chris? Perfect. So I'd like to start by saying a few words about where we are, where we ended this past year. The beginning of the pandemic, which was just at the very beginning of our fiscal year, we didn't know what was going to happen, and we were able to take advantage of the PPP loan, which I'm hoping most congregations were also able to do, with the help of folks with Cheryl Zay and with folks over at Bell Bank and Bishop Tesh. We were able to secure a $65,000 PPP loan, and we were able to have that entire amount forgiven. And the way we structured our loan, it was to make sure that everybody had full employment during that period, and we did. And that was really the most important thing, is to make sure that everybody was able to stay fully employed. So I think that having that full forgiveness was really perfect, and it allowed all of us to make sure that the Synod was on a firm financial ground this year that we just ended. And you'll see that in the audited financial statements. We actually, even though we didn't have event income, we did have very strong giving, and we were able to maintain full giving to the churchwide and to our partners in ministry, which especially the partners in ministry, I think, are always super important. Now I'd like to come over to this. This is our budget we have in front of us right now. First column of numbers on the left is the budget that we started with last year before we knew anything about the pandemic. And I think I don't have before and after, so I should put those up. You could compare those numbers to our audited financials, and you'll see that while the numbers don't match up, we still came out, because we had originally planned on events, we still came out in a positive cash and a positive asset situation. So moving over to the middle column, that would be the year that we're currently in. And we are, that year, we are planning for some drop in mission support as people get back on their feet, and we just don't necessarily know the situation. But otherwise, most of our actions will be basically the same. I don't remember why we anticipated a lower than usual Synod Assembly revenue. We didn't rejigger that when we came out with the new admission price. And then we also have higher than normal, if you look on their transfers from restricted. Now that would mean that we're using restricted dollars that were given in a prior period. So restricted dollars are either restricted by the Synod Assembly, by the Synod Council, or by the donor. And we are planning in this current year to use some of the funds left over from PPP, some of the extra money that we have left over because we were able to attain the PPP loan. We've got some special initiatives that you can see starting down below that the bishop has initiated, including revamping our website. And that'll be way down in professional. You'll see, I can't remember where it is. It's in there somewhere. There's one of them. It's in office expenses. You'll see office expenses bumps up by $20,000, and that's the new. So other than that, you can see that we are maintaining all of our support of 47% to the ELCA churchwide, our support of partners in ministry, and all of our other work. And we are also planning to have, at least within the budget, we're planning to have events. So that's important. We also have some of the new initiatives from the bishop, including the Table of Mercy, the First Young Adult Ministry New Start for BSU, the Commission on Racial Equity, and the Cohort Ministry. So those are newer initiatives from the bishop. We'll be able to pay out this first year because we had some of that leftover money because we had the PPP. So we have to spend the PPP on our expenses, but because we had that, we have leftover money, if that makes sense. So as you move down a little bit, you can see that we have our staff salary increases, I think 2.5%. I want to say 2.5%. Is that correct, Bishop Bill? 2.5%. Yeah. So that represents the 2.5%. And then, which gives us again in a positive position. We are moving forward into the next year where we have, and I believe our intent is that the Synod Assembly vote on this, correct? Yes, they vote on the next one after that, 23 as well. Tentatively as a preliminary budget is my understanding. 23 becomes a preliminary budget, right? So as you go through and you go back up to the top, Christina, you'll see much of the same information, but you see a reduction in that transfers from restricted. And we have to reevaluate at that point, right? Some of the other programming to make sure that we stay in a positive cash position. So that is a preliminary budget we'll be looking at, and that's basically our plan moving forward. And that's what I'd like to say about the budget. So and I'd like to add a little bit more information. We are truly blessed. Chris Eldridge will be joining the Synod as the treasurer. He has a deep history in finance and finance planning. And I think that he is going to be a wonderful fit moving forward as we align the resources of the Synod with the strategic plan of Bishop Bill Tesch. I'm really great at nuts and bolts, but I think Chris really has vision to take this to the next level. And I'm super, super excited that he has joined us. This is just right in his wheelhouse, and I think he's the right person for the next phase. So I think we're giving him a very healthy Synod budget moving forward, and I know that he is planning to working to align our resources and our budgeting towards that strategic plan. So I'm very excited for the next stages. And that's all I have, and I'm open to questions on chat. You're always welcome to email me.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And as the pandemic unfolded, we spent a lot of time on the phone and working through some stuff. It was I want to tell you a short story. When the pandemic first hit and our congregations locked down throughout the Synod, we saw an immediate 35% drop in our revenues, which we could not sustain. And so we made the decision to suspend our offerings to Churchwide until we figured out what was going on. Within 45 days, those resources had come back. And by the end of the year, we finished the year having fulfilled our full commitment to all of our partners, including the Churchwide organization. And I think we were like 0.5% behind the previous year. And so just great work and generosity on the part of our people. I'm just so grateful. Sharon Johnson is our Synod Vice President, and she's...
Well, I'm Sharon Josephson, but this is
yes, of course you are.
And I want to thank Catherine for all of her hard work. And we are so fortunate, all of you who are on the Zoom call, to have Bishop Bill as our bishop. He is a man of vision and a man of mission. But he has been strongly supported by every one of your representatives on Synod Council. This last 2 years has not been necessarily always the easiest, but they have been faithful servants on all of your behalf. And so when we talk about decisions about new paths going forward, every one of your congregations have had input. And under Bishop Bill's leadership, once again, there has been outreach unlike we've ever had before of members of the Synod Council going back and talking to individuals. And so never feel that your voices are not being heard on a regular basis, because every Synod Council meeting we're hearing about what's going on in the local congregations. And the money that we received under the pandemic funds, those things were used for office expenses and it's for maintaining our staff. And when we're talking about these other programs, a lot of them have been due to the restructuring of the way we do financial business with the bishop and with the treasurer, where we're going through those restricted funds and making sure programming that we're doing now actually fits those plans and that the money is expended that way, and making sure unrestricted dollars are being turned over, because otherwise we end up with a treasury, but no program, no mission. And so we're not fulfilling our calling. So just know that all of these parts work very beautifully together right now. And we're so fortunate, as I say, to have servants like Treasurer Catherine, Chris coming forward as a potential candidate, but who knows, we might have somebody else who wants to be treasurer. And of course, Bishop Bill and all the staff, Cheryl and Carla and everyone else in the outreach team. It's a team effort, and it's all about what our vision is going forward. But I thought I better say something right now. Otherwise, it sounds like it could be a two-person show. No, it's an entire team effort, starting with all of those visioning and all of those kinds of things that have happened on Zoom calls with your pastors and with your lay leadership. So it's been a whole new adventure, but they're working hard on your behalf. So thank you so much for doing this evening. Bishop Bill.
Thank you, Sharon. You're so kind. And I didn't send you a check in advance of this meeting or anything like that. I'm so grateful for the partnership that you and I have in this work, and the effectiveness of our council. And I think the way that our council is moving forward is due largely to your excellent leadership. So I'm so grateful to be in this work with you. Let's see, what's next, Chris?
The resolutions.
Okay. Again, if you have questions, feel free to chat, or if you haven't figured out the chat, unmute yourself and shout them out. We want your questions to be answered if possible.
And don't save your questions for the end. If you have a question about something that's being discussed, please share it. Please ask it now so that we can make sure that everything is being answered. So we're back to the Synod Assembly main page, and I'm going to click on the resolutions. And here we have the 6 resolutions.
Thank you. The first resolution, I will speak to it here. I will not speak to it at Assembly, but I'll speak to it here, except in my report. So this resolution is very intentionally not a resolution to pass the strategic plan as it exists in the 2 exhibits that we'll show you in a bit. It's really, the resolution is written in such a way so that the Assembly can give general affirmation to the overall, overarching theme of the strategic plan, with its 4 lines of effort. And those are specifically lifted up, which are working together toward congregational vitality with a specific focus on small membership rural congregations, recruiting and developing diverse and adaptive leaders, living more fully into our baptismal promise to strive for justice and peace in all the earth, and convening leaders to discern responses to ongoing and further change. Now, the reason why we're not asking you to approve word for word the PowerPoint document and the PDF that describe the plan in some more detail is because of this next resolve, which is that the Northwestern Synod in Assembly authorizes the bishop and synod staff in collaboration with the Synod Council to adapt the strategic directions as needed in response to ongoing and emerging changes. And so a plan, as they say, make a plan and God laughs, or every plan is perfect until, the action actually starts. So we want to have the flexibility to be able to adopt it. But this plan was developed over more than a year. It began with town hall meetings at our conference gatherings, just as we were rolling into the pandemic. It included some research on the part of mostly from our churchwide organization, but research that was also done here locally for the bishop's election the previous year. And then our core team, and their names are listed in the, why don't you show us one of the exhibits, Chris?
Would
Maybe
you prefer A or B, Bishop Bill?
just the short
one
one,
okay.
the one pager, yeah. And the core team consisted of Sharon Josephson, our Synod Vice President, and myself, plus other key leaders from around the Synod, and their names are listed there at the bottom. And we spent a lot of time evaluating what we had received from the conferences and from the research, and then a lot of time tweaking language. And then this whole Synod Council got involved in working over the language and evaluating the directions. And what we learned was we can tweak language. Every time we look at the plan, we want to tweak the language again. And we just need to stop working on language and start moving forward. And so that's why we wanted to try to have this opportunity for the assembly to give general affirmation to the plan without having to get bogged down in minute detail of changing a word here and there. So this document, it kind of also illustrates our planning methodology, which was we began by identifying our ways and means, or the ways that we can get things done, or the means we have, or our assets to do work. And we identified several assets there in that left-hand column. And then in the middle, we have the lines of effort, or the work we're going to do to try to get to our desired end state, and along with our values and our mission. And our desired end state is described in some narrative detail, and they should not be considered an exhaustive list by any means, but more of an example. So one example is that every congregation has at least one adult baptism or one adult that's received by affirmation of faith. Because if that's happening, if someone's coming into the church by affirmation of faith or by baptism who's not an infant but an adult or a younger person, it means that the church is reaching out with the gospel, and we want every church to be doing that. Another example is we know that the average congregation in the Northwestern Minnesota Synod expends no less than 102% of its regular income on fixed costs, which means that most congregations are raising extra money over and above their regular offering just to pay the bills. And that leaves very little left over for ministry itself. And so we have another end state that we would seek for is that we would get that number down to 90%, where there's at least 10% left over for actual ministry in the community. So just a couple of examples of desired end states. Again, the resolution you'll be voting on is not on every word that exists on this document or on Exhibit B, which is the longer PowerPoint, more detailed PowerPoint. It's really to give a general affirmation that we kind of like this direction of focusing on congregational vitality and recruiting leaders, living into our baptismal promise around justice and peace, and convening leaders to discern responses to ongoing and emerging change. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions you have. Not seeing any, let's move on to the next resolution.
Okay, Bishop Bill, the next resolution, Resolution 2, if Chris, you can pull that one up. This resolution in many ways ties into the first resolution. The first resolution talks about what our vision is going forward. And as part of that core team, I should let you know that most of the discussion around that resolution dealt with the fact that we want to be practical and we want it to be attainable. So those goals are not saying you need 50% to do this, it's 90%, you need only 10% to do it. You don't need to go out and recruit 25 people, it's only one. So it makes it much more doable for the individual congregations. And it would be something that the Synod Council and the Synod staff could use to go forward when they decide what's going to be the priority. The second resolution falls into that same category. And if you read that, you'll notice that it says adding 2 at-large positions to the Synod Council. The Synod Council already has 2 representatives from every conference, 1 pastor and 1 lay person, usually, and we do have at-large positions as well. We have some voting members. We have people who attend without vote, but have voice from various organizations of the church. But what we found when we're talking about enhancing lay leadership, talking about expanding ministry, talking about getting more diversity in the congregations, or rather in the Synod Council at this point, that we really don't have enough at-large positions. And so we're asking for 2 at-large, 2 more people to be on the Synod Council. And so that'll be going forward. But what it needs to be, it's going to be a bylaw change, but the resolution talks about that in the be it resolved clause. So this will not go into effect this year. It will have to go into effect the next year. And we'll hopefully have some people that will be sort of in training as we go forward in this next year. But that's the intent of this, to give more flexibility. And the other thing that does happen on the Synod Council, sometimes there's a need for certain expertise, maybe for a short period of time. And so you need to have that rotation that you don't necessarily receive unless we have that flexibility. So that's basically, I think, the intent, isn't it, Bishop? And it's in response to what's happening today and in response to the strategic plan.
Thank you, Sharon. Yes, and that's right on target. And specifically, you'll note in line 23 that these new at-large positions, along with the other 2 that already exist, shall be laypersons representing minority populations from within the Synod. The council spent a lot of time around that language. You know, we had Black, Indigenous, people of color, we had LGBTQ+, and then we realized we're really talking about folks who aren't at the table right now, for the most part. We need to get, so we just settled on minority populations.
So are there any questions of this? And when you think minority populations, it can be, who knows, people that aren't presently part of your congregations that you're trying to reach out to, or the Synod is trying to reach out to. If we had Microsoft in Northwest Minnesota, it might mean reaching out to people in the Microsoft community that we would, so it's a little flexibility there as opposed to naming the minority groups. Any questions? This is your time. Any questions? Because remember, at the Synod Assembly, we won't have time for questions. Okay.
I think because this is a bylaw change and not a change to the Constitution itself, it can go in effect immediately. Right.
At one time, we had talked about having sort of a phasing in, but I think this language will do that. Okay.
Correct.
And if any of you know any people that you think would be good, that could help us reach out and do new exciting things, let us know. Okay, resolution 3. Is John here?
I didn't see him. Resolution 3 is compensation guidelines. Often in previous Synod assemblies, it was not a resolution, but it was just something voted on. But this year it is a resolution. And so I will share my screen and I'll mute myself and let Bishop Bill talk.
Thanks, Chris. So the resolution is very simple. It's sort of like the strategic plan resolution, makes reference to other documents. And those other documents are also on the resource page for Synod Assembly. But this Synod's practice for some time now has been to have separate guidelines for whether pastors or rostered ministers, deacons or pastors or are in a parsonage, or whether they have their own housing. And then we also have a separate one for ministers of word and service or deacons, and a separate one for Synod authorized minister, and a separate one for lay church workers. So lots of documents there. We are contemplating consolidating those where they make sense. The main substantive changes are this. Instead of a percentage change this year, the committee did put in place some flexibility. Of course, these are guidelines, so congregations always have flexibility, but just by way of providing guidance, the team that drew these up, which is a group of diverse leaders from around the synod, wanted to be mindful of the realities as we emerge from this pandemic. And so they stated, you know, if you can do a 2 to 3% increase, great. But what they're recommending is $1,000, a $1,000 increase, which has an advantage in a couple of ways, in that it benefits people at the beginning of their career a little more than it benefits folks toward the end of their career. And that's in addition to the normal step that occurs because of years of experience. There is also a new pay chart for deacons, which is more detailed, and it acknowledges that deacons can come with a variety of different kinds of experience. They may have a PhD. They may have more education than the average pastor, ordained pastor in our synod, or they may have significantly less. Their credit hours required for their credential is actually 50 hours less than what's required of a pastor or a minister of word and sacrament. And so we designed this chart has been designed to acknowledge that that if you've seen one deacon, you've seen one deacon. Basically, they're not all the same. And so that's another substantive change. Those are the two main substantive changes to the guidelines. Is for this year, and probably this year only, a straight dollar amount increase in addition to the step increase for years of experience, and the expansion of the chart for deacons or for ministers of word and service, to try to acknowledge the differing kinds of educational backgrounds and experiences that they may bring.
The compensation guidelines have their own page underneath the resolution, so you can find that there.
In the past, and I have one assembly, and you might understand if I was a little distracted by other things during that assembly, but I do remember a lot of discussion around the compensation guidelines, especially with respect to parental leave. I'm hopeful that that's been resolved now, and that we're moving forward with the generous and I think appropriate parental leave that's in place. Questions? Okay, what's next?
Resolution 4, boundary training.
So boundary training is a requirement of all rostered ministers and synodically authorized ministers in our ELCA. The vast majority of synods also stipulate how often boundary training is to occur. This resolution, our constitution did not stipulate that. And in fact, we have had rostered ministers who've been several years since they've had boundary training, many years, sometimes going all the way back to the beginning of their ministry, so maybe 20 years. This is an important change because it brings us in alignment with practice throughout the church, and it also brings us in alignment with what the expectation is among most insurers of our congregations, which is that our folks would have regular training around respecting appropriate boundaries, especially, of course, with a view to potential sexual misconduct and boundaries around sexuality and intimacy, but not only that, also financial boundaries, social media, etc., friendship boundaries. Those kinds of professional boundaries are what we're talking about. So just so you know, to supplement this, our synod has also pioneered a truly distance learning type of 6-hour boundary training, which makes it, which is self-paced over the 6 weeks. And we will be offering that 3 times a year, which makes it very accessible for our leaders. But also, if our leaders would prefer to get the training elsewhere, they're free to do that. But this stipulates that it shall be every 3 years. Questions? Okay, moving right along. If we get done early, do we have to sit here and stare at each other for a half hour until 8:30? Oh, okay, good.
Absolutely not.
All right. All right, the next one is the one around anti-racism. So by the way, all of these resolutions, all the resolutions that are coming before the assembly, all originate within the Synod Council. What that means is that they do not have to be moved and seconded. They will be on the floor for consideration as soon as they come up on the agenda. And so this particular one is an attempt to acknowledge a reality in our world right now, which we all became especially mindful of with the murder of George Floyd back on Memorial Day weekend of 2020. But also something that brings us in alignment with what's becoming the practice in our whole church. In 2016, at the churchwide assembly, the recommendation was for synods to have a 3-year expectation for anti-racism training, or training around how to be an anti-racist. Our Commission on Racial Equity and Justice is working with 2 excellent consultants from the Milwaukee Area Synod to develop our own homegrown and contextualized version of training that's appropriate for our realities here in Northwestern Minnesota. But just like the training for boundary training, rostered ministers will have the option of obtaining this training elsewhere. We may have rostered ministers who don't like the approach, for example, that's being taken here, and they may choose to look elsewhere for some kind of anti-racism or diversity training, and that's completely fine. That's appropriate. But we will also be offering it here to make it contextualized for our synod and to be an option, which we think will probably be the most preferred option for our leaders. So the resolves are that that our rostered and synodically authorized ministers complete 6 hours of training once every 3 years. And then we recommend that this is a recommendation, that other church professionals and lay leaders would receive the training too. I want to note that this is a continuing resolution, and by our Constitution, a continuing resolution can be enforced by a 2/3 vote of the Synod Council, or by a 50% or a simple majority of the Synod Assembly. This is already enforced because it has been passed by a more than 2/3 margin of the Synod Council. But we felt it was important, given that given the importance of this subject and the fact that it impacts people's lives and work, that it also be affirmed at assembly. And so we're, instead of just proceeding with what the Synod Council has done, we're bringing it before the assembly where it needs to pass by a simple majority. So, questions?
Once again, Bill, I think the reason why this is coming forward to the assembly is so that the people in the pews also have some knowledge of what is going on. Because without that conversation between individual Christians, Lutheran Christians, nothing's going to change. And the world is changing around us, and we have to at least be aware of what's happening and try to make a real difference. So this training will be offered, and individual people in the congregation can also participate in this. And your church council, on behalf of you, have made an investment in this. And so we are confident that this will be hopefully a way to make a change in our world.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge the chat message from Joyce Lacey. Thank you for sharing that, Joyce. And that sounds like a especially concerning and unjust situation. I invite you to reach out to me. I've actually been working with a somewhat similar situation. So there are some resources available through our state, and I'd like to visit with you about that offline. But then also, unfortunately, the time has passed now for new resolutions. They had a deadline some time ago, but that doesn't mean that you cannot bring this before our synod staff and our synod council this year for us to take up as a potential way of living into that third line of effort, which is about working for justice and peace in all the earth, and that would certainly include vulnerable adults.
We've been having meetings with our roster leaders and SAMs during this time of COVID. We've been meeting via Zoom, and just on our last agenda, we talked about the need for policies within our congregations for children and vulnerable adults. So that it's definitely something that we tend to, and please do reach out to Bishop Bill. Bishop Bill, do you see this? The comment from Gail Larson. I'm glad to see this anti-racism training coming. I would like to bring educational resources to our congregation. So that's great. And then
thank you. I just want to say I was muted. Thank you for that comment. And it'll be later this year when the team is ready to roll out their training. Right now, we're spending a lot of time just in study and introspection, frankly, to learn about our own complicity in racial issues. So.
All right, and then our last resolution is really exciting. Pastor Carla is going to speak to it, and I'll share it now.
I bet all of you just love constitutions. At the 2019 Churchwide Assembly, as they do every year, constitutions are updated. And if you notice the Constitution, both for your congregation and for the Synod, there are some things that are kind of asterisked, and those are required provisions because we are church together. And so it is those required provisions that are brought forth through the Churchwide Assembly go into effect immediately. And then there are some provisions that are unique to each individual synod, and in your own case, a congregation. And those require some votes. And so in order to be in line with the model constitution for synods, there are 3 non-required provisions that we have included in a resolution. And the first one has to do with, probably doesn't affect our synod as much, and Bill could probably speak to this a little bit more, but bishops sometimes take on another role within their synod, like maybe being director for evangelical mission in combination with being a bishop. And so there is some compensation that is given for that work. And we are fortunate in our synod that we have a director for evangelical mission, Keith Zay. And so it doesn't really apply, but we want to keep our constitution in line with the model constitution. The second provision talks about this, when a congregation, sometimes when congregations get so small and people kind of disband and they sort of leave their church building in kind of abandoned. And in those rare, very rare cases, the synod can help that congregation by assuming the administration of that congregation, just to kind of probably close that congregation if it's needed. And there was a sentence that was added to that provision that such administration is only done as necessary and for whatever particular length of time that's required. I have not seen anything like that in my term, other than we did have one congregation that had closed, but they never took the official action to close. And so their congregation remained on the books, and the building the windows were boarded up, and the it was in disrepair. And so in that particular case, this would apply. The third provision in order to bring our constitution up to the model constitution for synods talks about our deacons, who are word and service rostered ministers, and it brings their participation in all of the various meetings across our synod in line with our ministers of word and sacrament. And so it's just parallel wording that's included into our constitution. So those are the three non-required provisions. And the other provisions that are being voted on that affect our constitution have to do with those other resolutions that we talked about, for instance, the boundary training. But those are noted in the wording of the resolution, and you can also see a copy of the synod, the draft of the synod constitution, and those highlighted areas in yellow or underlined are what we are voting on at this particular assembly.
Thank you so much, Carla. Carla is just an amazing partner in this work. She's our associate for Synod Administration, Pastor Carla Mickelson, and she manages a mountain of details while also taking lots of pastoral concerns of our leaders and our congregational leaders and our rostered leaders all week long. So I'm grateful for your partnership. And she also is our guru on constitutions. So, and she's shaking her head, but she knows more about it than most people have. She's forgotten more than most people know about constitutions. So thanks, Carla. And we're also aided in the work around constitutions and all of this by our ELCA secretary, Sue Rothmeyer, who is a deacon, and her staff, who've been greatly a big help to Carla and to all of us as we've worked through this. So I think we're moving on to just the other items. There will be a worship service starting at 9 o'clock.
Yes, 9. Yep.
9 o'clock. It's a half hour. It'll be an inspirational service. We have gifted leaders from around the synod, message from yours truly. And so tune in for the worship. And our keynote speaker this year is Dr. Willie Jennings, who is a renowned theologian who's written a work of theology, several works, but one in particular has already considered and has been named by some as a masterpiece of contemporary theology. Dr. Jennings is out of the Baptist tradition and has been teaching at Duke University, which is a primarily Reformed university, for several years, and now teaches at Yale. We're really excited about Dr. Jennings. We're going to hear from him twice. Once will be a Bible study on his favorite book of the Bible, which is the book of Acts. It also happens to be one of my favorites. And one on a keynote address on a topic that will be related to what we're wrestling with as an assembly. So looking forward to hearing from Dr. Jennings. Our church-wide representative is Pastor Dr. Ruben Duran. I know Ruben well. Ruben actually hails from Peru and has served parishes around the country, but has been working at our church-wide organization on primarily focused on starting new congregations. He's been the director for outreach in our ELCA and has done just phenomenal work. And I've loved working with Ruben. He's an inspiring leader, and I'm looking forward to hearing from him. Let's see. That's it for me. And now I'm Pastor Carla, back to you on elections.
On the Synod website, there are the biographies for those who are being elected to Synod Council and those who are being elected to the Churchwide Assembly. Churchwide Assembly takes place in 2022, but they need to know all of this information in plenty of time to help do the planning for Synod Assembly, for the Churchwide Assembly. The Churchwide Assembly is going to be held August 8th through the 12th of 2022 at the Greater Columbus Convention Center in Columbus, Ohio. We have a formula which we use both for Synod Council and Churchwide Assembly that talks about representation. And so I think we talked a little bit previously. There are representatives, both lay and rostered ministers from each of our conferences on Synod Council. And then we have some at-large positions. And then also our officer positions. In Churchwide Assembly, there is another formula that's based on membership, number of baptized members within our synod. And so that formula was presented to our conferences at their spring gathering, and people were nominated at the spring gathering for those various positions, whether it's a lay male or lay female, and or a rostered minister, which would be either a word and sacrament minister or a word and service minister. And so we do have a couple holes yet that we're still trying to fill, but all of that information will be on the website, and we have alternates also that are being voted on for Churchwide Assembly. Chris, is there anything else you want to say about the biographies or anything on the website?
No, I'll be updating the biographies as we get them. You'll see like draft is on the biographies, and there's a date behind there. I updated one today. And so, but if there's people you would like to nominate, especially for those vacancies, please email that nwmnassembly@gmail. So on the biographies, there's some that I don't have the information for yet, but there's a name, and then there's some that are vacant. And so, especially for the churchwide. So please take a look at that if that's something that you are interested in. We have a couple people on, Jerry and Mary Peterson were at Churchwide this last time. I got to be a voting member. I'm a big church nerd, but it was a really great time and wonderful worship, and it was good to be together and do the work of the whole church. And so, yeah, it's a great time for that. And then one other thing I wanted to show all of you. So here's our main Synod Assembly page. And here is a page on reports. And I encourage you to take a look at them. We looked at the budgets, but Bishop Bill wrote a report, and he'll be speaking a report, but they won't be the same thing. So during Synod Assembly. So I encourage you to read this. This is our stats of the work that we've done as a synod. Each synod staff person wrote a report. You can find all those here. And then there's some churchwide reports and organizations that we work with here. So you can take a look at those. A couple of them are videos, but I really encourage you to check out Bishop Bill's beforehand, because you won't hear the exact same thing on Saturday.
Just a note, we will establish a quorum right at the beginning of assembly. We have more than a quorum registered, and we will use that number to establish the quorum. It's going to be impossible to state exactly how many people are present, just like it is at an in-person assembly. People may have registered, but they're not in the building at the time, or they're out and about. So we will base our quorum on the number of registrations, and we'll just have one report from the credentials committee at the beginning of assembly to establish a quorum. So your presence is important throughout the assembly because your voice and your wisdom are needed. So I hope you'll be there. If it's possible for you to have a separate device for the purpose of voting, that's great. You don't have to. This is how we're going to proceed with voting. I will begin by using a poll, a Zoom poll, which is the easiest way, but only one device can cast a vote. So I see several of you are sharing a computer or a device. That means you too will just get one vote. And I will make a judgment and that whether or not it basically needs to be an overwhelming margin. And if it is, then I will, as the chair, make the judgment that a motion or an amendment or a resolution has passed or not. And so, if it's close, we'll use our voting procedure, which will be, we'll just talk about that on Friday. But that's basically a link is sent to your email address, and then you'll vote that way. So I'm hoping that, I don't believe that most of the resolutions and budget and et cetera will be close, but if they are, we will make sure that the voice of the assembly is heard by proceeding to the more formal ballot. One last thing, this is last year, one of the big things we were going to do at Assembly was celebrate the 50th anniversary of the ordination of women, the 40th anniversary of the ordination of women of color, the 10th anniversary of the ordination of openly LGBTQ plus people. And so we are, for this year, what we are doing is we've created Pastor Caitlin Jensen with support from our Synod staff is creating podcasts, conversations with leaders, with primarily women from across the Synod. And they're just lovely conversations, and each one begins with recording and the script from when our separate church bodies passed this resolution more than 51 years ago now. And so please pay attention to those podcasts, and then we'll also have a conversation with Pastor Caitlin just to hear what her experience was like with that. And then at this year's women's gathering, there will be a worship service celebrating the 50-40-10 at which all of the women in ministry and people of color and LGBTQ plus people will be invited. So that's that. I think we're done, unless there are other questions. Not seeing any. There's still some sunlight here in northwestern Minnesota, and it's a beautiful evening. So I encourage you to take in some fresh air, and we'll see you on Friday night. Thank you, everybody. God's peace.
Thank you all for emailing me. If you need to fix email addresses, please go ahead and do that. And I'll be sending out an email later this week with some registration information. But thank you all for coming and finding your way to this Zoom.